This is Show Up as a Leader, a show from People Forward Network, helping you maximize your positive impact on the world by becoming your best, fully authentic self. Be prepared to sit back and probably laugh, probably cringe, and you are likely going to want to be taking some notes or come back and listen to this conversation later where you can jot down notes. I had the awesome Claire Chandler back on the show, repeat performance. We had such a great time the last time she was on the show. She is the president and founder of Talent Boost, and she specializes in helping leaders and businesses unlock the limitless talent that fuels perpetual growth. And her brand new book is just launching called Growth on Purpose. And we had a lot of wonderful conversations of awesome things that are in the book. She talks about 4 key pain points that she sees. She has a great model on purpose that I'm not going to give away, but it is the 4 A's model on how you grow on purpose. She talks about the 4 P's of culture, and we just talk about where some things go astray and how, for those of you who are formal leaders, how do you foster where people follow you by demonstrating your humanity, not your infallibility, and the value of connection with the purpose, connection with each other, connection with a strategy, and just lots and lots of wonderful nuggets and some good humor along the way. Take a listen. All right, my friend Claire, I am so happy to have you back on the show for a repeat performance. I had so much fun with our first conversation. I don't remember how long ago it was at this point in time.
It was a while.
It was a while. And now you're back because you have a brand new book, Growth on Purpose. So first of all, congratulations.
Thank you so much. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you for letting me back on your stage because you already know what you're getting. So like kudos to you, or maybe you're glutton for punishment. I'm not sure, but so appreciate you that you're willing to have me as a return guest. I have been looking forward to this conversation.
Oh, I was like, this was a hell yes. I didn't even have to blink. I'm like, of course I am. This is so good. So we're going to dig into the specifics, obviously, of your book, but just talk to me about like why you've written other books. So why this book and why now?
Yeah. So I have been a solopreneur now. I have run my business I hit the 10-year mark back in September.
Congrats.
Yeah. So thank you. So like big deal, right? You would think I've been drinking champagne morning, noon, and night since then, but you know, the work would suffer. And so I've been looking back over, you kind of get nostalgic, right? When you hit these sort of milestones in your life, your career, your business, what have you. And as I looked back over, especially my more recent years of my client work, there is this consistent approach, methodology that I have taken my clients through, especially, like I said, in more recent years. And I've written other books, as you know. I kind of caught the fever, and I'm like, I want to run another one. Like there's something bubbling in me, and I had all these different options for writing a book. And I partnered with a publisher this time. Previous to this, they were self-published. And this time I decided, no more screwing around. Like I'm going to do it a little more structured, a little bit more disciplined. And in speaking with the publisher, you know, I brought them in very early. And I said, I don't know what I should focus my next book on. I have several ideas. I have several ways that I can go. And one of them was to really do a deep dive exploration into the methodology that I use in my client work. And when I brought that one up to him, he was like, stop your list. That's the one. And so I was like, you think? And he's like, yeah. And so, you know, we went through this kind of process, this mapping of getting, you know how this is. I'm preaching to the choir here, but of getting my methodology, my brand, my beliefs, my quirky personality, all those different things out of my head and onto paper in a more cohesive way. And so it was through the unpacking of that and the articulation of that in narrative form that the book just took on a life of its own. And so here we are several months later, and it is finally ready for the world. As you know, because I gave you a sneak peek copy of the book. So
I know. Well, and we're timing this where I believe that this is going to air when your book comes out. So I'm super, super excited for that. Yay. And you got the unveiling today, which is always super fun, right? You got your box of your early delivery.
Yeah, I got all verklempt when I opened the box, and there were the books. And yeah, I did a quick post on LinkedIn about it. And it was interesting because, as I said, like on the post, it's not the first time I'd seen the book. Certainly, I mean, I've gone through the editing process, the proofing, the final artwork, the cover approval, all of those things. But there's something about opening that package and holding that book in your hands for the first time, like the physical book. And I got teary-eyed. My husband was like taking a video for the record, and he was just like looking at me like, "Yeah, right." And I'm like,
Yeah.
like, you don't know. Like, he's not a writer. Like, he doesn't know, you know?
It's like you birthed a baby. Right?
Yeah. Like, I mean, it's taken about, 6-9 months. So that's about right.
So here's the thing. I know we're going to dig into specifics, and you actually cover this in chapter 2, but talk to us about what it means to grow on purpose. And you say growth on purpose means creating a workplace that is both high performing and high purpose. So talk to me about the high performing part first, and then talk about high purpose and how they're not an either or, they're a both and.
They are absolutely both essential. And depending on the leader that you talk to, they either lead first with, we need bottom line results that are expressed through a certain level of performance, or other leaders who say, no, it starts with the vision, it starts with setting the horizon, and then everybody sort of rises to meet that expectation. And I have found in my experience and in my working with clients that both of those things have to exist in harmony, right? You can't have aggressive performance objectives if you don't also have a unifying purpose that people can kind of sink their teeth into. And on the flip side, you can't just have this lofty, aspirational, blue sky, kumbaya sort of experience if you don't hit your targets. I don't care if you're a non-for-profit. I have clients who are nonprofit, and their motto is, we're nonprofit, but we're also non-loss, right? Like, we're not trying to run ourselves out of business. We just have a different business model. And so I have seen the most successful organizations are the ones that are deeply committed and in alignment with both of those sides of the coin.
I think that's so critical because, and I love that you brought up like the nonprofits, if we just go there, but a lot of people think, oh, of course, it's easy for them to be purpose-driven organizations. But if they don't have, to your point, an effective business model and people don't know how they fit in what they're working towards and those guardrails, people get frustrated and then they leave, and you can't grow and further your mission and your purpose when you don't have people and you don't have a solid business model and business plan. And on the flip side, like you said, you can have a lofty purpose, but if I at the individual level don't feel connected to that purpose, if it is not part of my daily lived experience and I don't see how I fit in, it means nothing to me as an employee. And it can frustrate the hell out of me at the same time. Not mean anything, but it can actually turn into a frustration trigger.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's sort of in invisible ink, there are certain words that are kind of woven throughout the entire book. And I think one of them is one that you just touched upon, which is connection. I think, first of all, just the first question teeing up this conversation around high performance versus high purpose, there has to be a deep aligned connection between those two. But there also has to be a very deep connection between what individual employees do in their daily role and how that somehow makes a visible, tangible impact on the long-term and or bottom line mission of the company. If they don't see that connection, especially in this day and age, to your point, they will leave.
Love it. And it's not just, by the way, for people who are listening, it's not just Gen Zs and millennials. Like, we know from the data that all generations want to be with a purpose-driven organization. But let's be honest, millennials and Gen Zs are now the future majority, or current, depending on the industry, majority of the organization. And they don't have the patience for you to work your crap out. They're going to leave and find someone who already has their act together. So if you're struggling with hiring, there you go.
I mean, I think that's so true. I think these, I can't believe I'm going to go, these kids today, but this is a compliment. So just hear me out, Gen Z. I do think these younger generations have been pushing the conversation in ways that the rest of us just sort of tolerated. I'm a Gen Xer. And so I was, brought up with we didn't just job hop. We had to pay our dues. You had to do the grunt work up front. You had to accept that. And
you tolerated the book. You tolerated the BS, and then you just complained about it to all of your friends and family.
Exactly. But and then we were under command and control leadership, which you see in the book. Like I go on kind of a rant about that is dead. And if you still are holding on to that leadership style, and wondering why everyone is racing for the exits, then you're missing something. But I think these younger, newer generations that are flooding our workforce are advocating for themselves and for a work environment like no other generation before them. The rest of us were more of the suck it up, pay your dues, and eventually you will get noticed and advanced sort of generation. These guys are like, listen, I'm not a cradle to grave worker. I am going to stay as long as it fits in with my lifestyle, my life choices, my other commitments. And the day that it doesn't, I don't know, either look for something else or become a real problem to my boss.
Well, and I will say, I think that that's such a healthier view of how work fits into our life anyway. So there is that. So yeah, absolutely. All right. So we have to dive in. What's so funny is obviously I got a PDF copy, not a regular copy. And I'm scrolling and I was like, literally, I screamed out, yes. And my husband and son are probably like, what is she doing? Because right away in the introduction with what you call leadership principle 1, leaders own their walk. That was one of my favorite stories from our previous podcast conversation. But in case people haven't listened to that, and you got to go back, by the way, and we'll have to link it in the show notes to go back and listen to the previous one. But this is like the best conversation or the best story ever. So talk to me about what you mean about owning your walk.
So this story that literally starts the book, and I did share it on our last conversation, and I've shared it before. And every time I share it, people look at me like, "There's no way that this actually happened. There's no way that this dude actually is walking the earth." And I'm here to tell you, it's true. It is not an amalgamation of different half-assed bosses I've had. Like this was a true guy. And so it was like maybe a year and a half before I left my corporate career, and I was walking down the hall back to my office. And this was like the 1 week a month that I was actually in the corporate headquarters. Otherwise, I was traveling and on the road. I think I had a minute and a half to run to the ladies' room in between meetings because let's face it, corporate, you are constantly running. And this is before COVID. This is before hybrid. This is before flexible, anything. And so anyway, I'm walking back to my office and my boss stopped me in the hall. Hand to God, this is what happened. He goes, "You need to tone down your walk." And so I'm like super eloquent, of course. And I go, what now? And he goes, your walk, it's too happy. It's too bouncy. And people are going to wonder if you're up to something like something they don't. Right. And, unfortunately, this was not uncharacteristic of him. He wasn't having some sort of a seizure. He wasn't having some sort of moment. This was pretty typical of the fatherly wisdom I would get from him. And so it was like, yeah, okay, thanks for the tip. And then I kept walking back to my office. And as I say in the introduction to the book, spoiler alert, I didn't tone down anything. And what's funny is in the moments, I didn't recognize that exchange for what it has become in hindsight. Because again, this wasn't sort of a one-off comment or observation from him. But as I pieced together my entire corporate career, which I got a lot of value out of, I would not trade for the world, but it was so emblematic of corporate culture done wrong, right? Of leaders and organizations advertising for people with entrepreneurial spirit, and then bringing people together and saying, you're going to get to bring your authentic self to work and, forge your own career and blah, blah, blah. And as soon as you color outside of the lines, they go, whoa, we didn't mean like that, right? And so there's this disconnect, right? We were talking about that invisible word of connection that is woven throughout this book. There is a disconnect between what people are promising in terms of their employer brand and what is reality within the walls of your company. And the wider the disconnect, the faster the right talent is going to scramble for the exit.
Well, and so I captured this quote. One, you have just so many amazing nuggets. I was just going, yes, 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 in your book. So everyone needs to go get it. But so I'm going to read this back to you because I just this is just so critical with what you're talking about. You wrote, "Stop regarding your leadership position as a role you play and embrace it as an obligation to live, work, and lead with your unique personality on full display. True leaders don't emulate other leaders. They are deeply self-aware and beautifully flawed, and they step into their strengths with vulnerability, transparency, and personal accountability. When you do that, when you own your walk, your people will follow you willingly and enthusiastically. Like that is just like can we just have a mic drop moment there? Like, yeah, but I love that so much. And here's the thing. I do think, I even think about in my career, like prior to relaunching Salveo Partners, we read about this in our Rehumanizing the Workplace book, when I was at a consulting firm that did have that entrepreneurial spirit, and they brought me in because they're like, we don't get you, but we know we need you, and it's different, and right. And it was great for a while. Like it really was. I learned and growed, and it was awesome. And then, like happens so often, part of their exit strategy, they sold to a larger company, and that entrepreneurial mindset was now a liability. And it was, Rosie, can you please go in a box? Rosie, can you please stop challenging the status quo? Rosie, can you please not be you? And it was awful. Right. And my mental health eroded and my well-being eroded. And it was, it's all the stresses that go with it. And so I think, and then once I was done from there, I'm like, I don't wear suits. I like got rid of all my suits. I'm like, screw you. Like, I don't dress unprofessional, but I'm like, I'm not going to be in these buttoned up suits. Like, I'm going to have a cute, colorful blazer and some bling on. And like, I'm going to be me. Like, screw you. Right. But here's the thing is, one, yeah, we have to create workplace environments that really do celebrate the uniqueness of people and say you can walk, however. I mean, obviously you can't behave like an unprofessional butthead, but can we let people be their authentic selves and contribute their gifts, in a way that makes sense and whatnot. But on the flip side of that, though, and you probably deal with this too, we work with a lot of organizations on the organizational level. We do team level, and we also do individual leadership development. And a lot of the work that I am doing with leaders is there is this huge fear and self-limiting narrative that keeps them from being their authentic self, because either they have had like PTSD from someone telling them that their walk sucks, or don't walk the way they are, or from lived experiences early on in their life that they had that not enough narrative. They have that there's something wrong with me, I should be somebody other than I'm not. So I think sometimes it's easier said than done to say own your walk. What are your thoughts around that?
So what's so interesting to me, you will notice in the book that it is written to the leaders at the top of an organization, right? And early reviewers of the manuscript kind of said to me, listen, I know that you're writing to a very specific type of leader, but everybody can relate to what it is that you're conveying here. What I find so interesting, and I say this obviously throughout the book, is that leaders shape culture, right? The biggest impact on the culture of an organization is the behavior of the leaders. And so all of the things that you just listed, the fear of consequences if I am truly myself on full display, the fear of repercussions if I try something new and it fails, the imposter syndrome, I don't want to stick out and be too unique, right, is projected upon the everyday employee by the leadership. And I want your audience to lean in and hear this loud and clear. The leaders at the top of the organization are going through those same fears, those same insecurities, those imposter syndromes, because they have told me that.
Me too. Like, they're humans.
They're humans, and they have been led to believe, and they have convinced themselves that they have to suppress that. And their employees, who are so desperately trying to follow their lead, want them to understand that the way that you get them to follow you is by demonstrating your humanity, not your infallibility, because it's just not achievable. And so coming back to this sort of key word, it's kind of the theme of this conversation around connection. The leaders at the very top of an organization are the most isolated human beings in an organization. So when we talk about this deep human need for connection at the worker level, the leaders are missing it too. There is this peer pressure when they go into the executive wing or into the boardroom for them to tone down their walk, for them not to be themselves on full display, to not be vulnerable. And the organizations that perpetuate that sort of peer pressure where you start to feel like it's an after school special. Like, do these generations even understand what the after school special is?
I don't know.
It was life affirming, let me tell you.
We're going to go to Schoolhouse Rocks
I mean,
anyway.
Schoolhouse Rock, Reading Rainbow, like the whole thing. But great space. Anyway, I digress. But it's the organizations that perpetuate that sort of mentality that I have to conform as a leader as well. They are dictating how the rest of the culture is getting shaped, the behaviors that are getting reinforced, and the behaviors and the performance and the personalities that are getting promoted and rewarded and advanced. And so I did write the book to the leaders at the top, but if they remember nothing else, they have to remember that the people that are trying to follow them and that are suffering from these imposter syndromes, they're suffering from as well. And that's a point of relatability that they can build upon.
I love that you said that, because I do think, I think with the organizations we work with, whether we're, we might be working with truck drivers and customer service reps or, frontline caregivers or whatnot. And I can't tell you how often I hear them say, well, I can't say that because they're a fill in the blank, the VP or CEO, or it's like there's this hierarchy that they've put in their mind and they feel like they can't say, and it's not even about fear. It's just like, oh, I don't want to do that. And maybe ingrained in them is something about not speaking up to authority or whatnot, right? They got their own stuff. And I always remind them, like, they are a human who happens to have that job. They are a human who is just as flawed as you are. And the same thing, like, I will tell you, every single organization we work with, every single leader we support, regardless of industry. And I will tell you, we work with executive teams and coach CEOs directly, as well as other leaders. And there is some element that shows up over and over and over of that imposter. Like, they're going to figure out I didn't deserve this job. They're going to figure out I don't belong here. They're going to figure out they made a mistake. When is the other shoe going to drop? They are running around as a scared little 10-year-old version of themselves, hoping to not be found out and trying to hold their crap together and lead an organization with all the pressures that come at them. Granted, you don't want your CEO to like fall apart in front of you. But there's a way to kind of say, like, I get it, I struggle too, or to demonstrate our humanity. So yeah, 100%. Anyone that is in that, ooh, I can't because of fill in the blank, like, our roles and our jobs, like, that's just what it is. Like, you're a person who happens to have that job. That does not define you, and that does not somehow negate or give you a get out of jail free pass or some kind of buffer from the messiness of being human. Like, newsflash, it doesn't.
And it's interesting that you went to like the 10-year-old, because I think it is the 10-year-old, the 6-year-old, somewhere in that childhood range that leaders and individual contributors need to tap into. There is such tremendous value in reconnecting with your childlike enthusiasm. The reason that my walk is happy and bouncy and all of that is because then, as now, but for different reasons, I enjoyed my work. I like what I do. I find the joy in it. I find the things that fulfill me. And if they don't fulfill me, then I know it's time to pivot, whether it's to expand my role, shift to a different one, or move on, which is ultimately what I did. We have to remind ourselves that there is this child within us who's not looking to pitch a tantrum, but is looking to let out that joy, to express that joy. And oh my gosh, how much easier would it be to follow a leadership team, a CEO, a CHRO, a COO, even a CFO, who stand in this place of conviction about why they do what they do, why it matters to them, why they keep showing up to work. I talk about that in the book, right? Kind of reconnecting with, yes, the organizational why, but also your deeply personal why, because that's how you're going to make better connections between yourself and your people, and between their role and the bigger mission.
Well, I love that. And yeah, you give those questions in the book, and it reminded me, like, if we're not having those conversations on, let's say, a quarterly basis, I mean, worst case scenario, your annual review, which that's a whole other story. But I mean, if we're not having regular conversations where we ask people, what lights you up right now and what keeps you coming back? Because we are emotional creatures, and there's something to be said about reconnecting to that limbic brain and reconnecting to the emotional reason of why we do what we do or what, because we can get so stuck in the day to day and like the tasks and the to-do list, and we can then get sucked into the things that aren't going well, or all the changes that have to happen, or the system conversion that went disaster, or this client we didn't get, or this account we lost, or right, we can get caught up in all of the things that we have to do, but also all the things that aren't going well, and we lose sight of why we keep putting this effort in the first place. And I think it's a formal leader's role. I mean, we can do this as peers too, but it's a formal leader's role to be a steward of that and continue to reconnect people to that over and over more than you think, by engaging them in storytelling, by asking those good questions. And I think we don't do it enough.
I love that so much. The leaders set the tone, right? As I say in the book, leaders shape culture. Leaders set the tone for what is tolerated, what is reinforced, what is rewarded, and what gets advanced. And so if the leaders are suppressing, if the leaders are acting from fear, if the leaders are blaming each other rather than learning from when they stumble, that's what the employees are going to see. You know, there's always this search for talent, right? We called it the war for talent 20 years ago. The war for talent is coming. The war for talent has been waging all around us for years and years, but it's not about competing for all the talent. It's about finding and nurturing and cultivating the right talent for however long they choose to stay. And not everybody leaves because you've made them miserable. A lot of people, as we were talking about, especially in these younger generations, leave because it's their time to move on. But wouldn't it be better if we create an environment where they can come in, they can find that joy or tap into that inner child and do their best work in ways that are meaningful for them for whatever amount of time that they're with us, and then self-select their next move, whether it's within your organization or beyond that, because that's only going to reinforce your brand reputation. And that's what sells, right? That's what promotes you to the next generation of talent.
Well, and I think that's so important because so often you do have people that have this scarcity mindset of, oh my gosh, what if they leave or whatnot? And I do think, like, if you've had a stellar experience at an organization where you've been treated like a human being and you've been able to grow and whatever that looks like, and it is because there just isn't a space at that organization, and the organization recognizes that and supports you in moving on, doesn't, get mad at you and have a temper tantrum or whatever, you know what? They're going to be your biggest champion and advocate out in the marketplace to refer talent to you. And guess what? As you grow and maybe, a different point in time in their career, they might be that boomerang employee that comes back in a bigger role or whatnot. And so I think that sometimes we're really short-sighted if we're just saying, we've got these positions and we're short-staffed and we have all this work and et cetera. We could have a whole other conversation about you need to have a stop doing list, but that's a different conversation. But I think that's such an important piece. And so, what this brought up for me, it was a story in your book that I literally laughed out loud. I mean, I laughed a lot in your book, but but you guys, it is funny. It's very practical. It's very good, and it's also really funny. So you need to get the book. But speaking of, aligning people or connecting people with the purpose, where it's not just words on a website or words on a wall. I was laughing. You told a story about a road show where the president of the company went around and was like, well, no, I went around and I did a road show and we did town halls and we communicated the mission to everyone. And I laughed because I'm like, oh my God, I can't tell you how many times I've heard this from either prospective clients, like, oh yeah, we did a road show. We came up with our new values and our new pillars, and we did a road show and rolled it out to all employees, and they wondered why it didn't work. And I'm like, oh my God. So let's unpack why that failed, because it usually does.
So this was not this particular story, but it's really super especially effective when people do the road show to sort of soften the blow for we're going to be doing some downsizing and some retrenching, right? Because that's always prefaced with, we just did a 3-week offsite strategic session with the most expensive consultant that we could find, right? And now, not only do we have to find savings, we actually are starting at a negative because we had to spend so much money on, I don't want to say McKinsey, but there you are. Listen, McKinsey's very talented, but they're not cheap. So this particular story, again, is so, the reason I told the stories that I did was because they were pretty universal, right? Like, these are stories that actually happened, changed some names and some details to protect the innocent and the guilty. But this was so again, emblematic of and to your point, you laughed out loud because it was not like so unheard of, right? So this was a leader. He had been with his organization for a while, but he was now in a position where he was like president of this big division. And so he had been part of these roadshows. And so, I was just asking him what I thought would have been pretty foundational questions, right? Do they all, do they know what the mission is? Sure, they know what the mission. Now, what's even funnier is when you ask any executive what the mission is, they will furtively glance around to remember what wall they have hung the mission statement on. Then that's really not what I'm after with the question, right? Your mission is kind of what gets you up in the morning, what kind of propels you forward. So I asked him, what was the mission, and does everybody understand it? And he said something to the effect of, well, unless they've been living under a rock, I don't remember if I left that phrase in the book. But unless they've been living under a rock, they should know what the mission is, because we went out, we've been communicating this out, we've been doing road shows, we've been doing, town halls, we've been doing all this stuff. And out was like the word he kept using. And I just listened very patiently. And then finally I said, so how do you know that they got it, that it landed? What did you get reflected back in terms of their full comprehension, not just of the words that you gave them, but the meaning behind it and how they were going to attach themselves to it? Crickets, like absolute crickets. Because every executive, and listen, in their defense, and you just described it, they are running from meeting to meeting, from fire to fire, from priority to priority, to commitment. And they don't have time to take that one step back. And because they don't take that time, because they have crammed their calendar so full, so they have a built-in excuse not to have that time. I work with corporate clients, like the comedy writes itself, right? So, but they don't set aside that time to go, well, wait a second. We spent all of this time and energy and effort on communication materials to go out, but did we really allow enough space and enough grace to hear back from the organization that they understand it, they buy into it, and they are willing to charge the next hill in service to it? And if you don't check for that and confirm understanding and endorsement and engagement and commitment, you're not even getting half the battle won.
Well, it's funny when you say he said, unless they've been living under a rock, I've heard those exact words before. So I don't know if it was in the book or not, but I have heard those words, well, unless they're in a rock, because if we put it all out there, people should pay attention. Well, newsflash, like how many times have you been like, someone asked you a question, you're like, I've sent you 3 emails. Clearly you didn't read your email. Like, let's just be real. But we say this kind of tongue in cheek, but I think there's a couple really important points of that. And one is that, I always borrow from Margaret Wheatley when we say this, that people only support what they've helped to create. And so when you're going offsite with for an offsite, and it's fine to have that strategy, but then if you don't come back and vet it at some other level and include people, it's a push out and a rollout. Again, it triggers our deep wiring for autonomy, first of all. And so we show up as resistors and saboteurs and all of that. So it literally activates one of our threat triggers in our brain. But it's also like, again, if we're not bought in or we don't get it. And so with one of our clients, they did all this and there was no talking them out of, like, they had spent so much time and money and they were super proud of it and not trying to it was decent, but it was like, oh my God. But they didn't think about how do you actually foster buy-in and connection, emotional connection to this, versus people are pissed that you spent all these money for these, desk things and, trinkets they can bring home and things on their badge and all that stuff, all the reinforcer tools. But it's like, okay.
I'm laughing because in my corporate days, I was part of all of the swag that came with the change, right? Like, were they going to be stress balls? Were they going to be Lego sets? Were they going to be Slinkies? That was one year. I'm like, I don't know what that was supposed to signify.
But hey, go fall down a stair and try not to get bent. I don't know.
I don't know. They were colorful, they fit the logo, and they were on sale. So there you are.
Hey, it's a fidget toy for people who are kinesthetic learners. But I digress. So people are like, this conversation's going, woo. Hopefully they're enjoying it.
Hey, just jump in. The water's fine.
Just jump in. Hey, it's fun in here. Come join us. There's no sharks, I promise. But seriously, so one of the things that then we were like, okay, so one of the things that we agreed to in our contract was, okay, you've done all this work and it's decent work, but there's a big gap. And so let's take all of this. And now that you've rolled it out, and whether people have looked at it or paid attention or not, we're going to actually go around and engage them in storytelling. when have you been most excited to work here? What first brought you to this organization? What keeps you coming back? Whatever, because as people are telling stories, you're hopefully going to see, if you did this well in alignment, you're going to start to see elements pop out from your vision, from your values, etc. And then you can start to connect the dots back to, oh, right. And so they were like, oh, we missed that part. And I'm like, you need to have the people to see themselves in it and see themselves in it through story, because that's how our brains work. And so that was what we did with them to help bridge that gap, not just asking them, but it was, okay, take all this now and now engage them in storytelling. And then hopefully, because I'm like, you also might find out as you start to engage them in this, that there's a complete mismatch of what you came up with, but hopefully there's not. And let's, see. So I think, if we don't take that step, and then it's an ongoing, like with one of our clients, they have like monthly safety meetings and stuff. And they've been embedding practices for the last several years, and some areas are better than others, but it's who has a recent story of our why in action. And they have a collection of stories that they can share if no one has one. And we keep telling them that's because it brings them back to that emotional connection of how they first identified their why in the first place was through storytelling. And so we always use we use the metaphor of a lighthouse, and we say storytelling is what keeps the lighthouse illuminated for people. And so emotionally reconnecting them. So anyway, I was just laughing. Anyway, I was laughing my butt off at that story, and I was like, oh my goodness.
I love all of that. There's a metaphor that one of my colleagues in my network uses around, would you rather be the lighthouse or the tugboat? And to your point, the lighthouse is one that draws people in. The tugboat is the one that kind of has to pull people or cargo ships or what have you along, right? And it's harder and there's more friction. And I think there's, as you kind of talked about, well, wait a minute, we've got to hit pause on the rollout of this really beautiful, read it, expensive communication packet to do this, engage in storytelling and get some reflection for the business. There was a collective groan, I almost heard it, from the leaders in your audience who are going, oh my gosh, it's going to take too much time.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And there's this concept that when I bring it to corporate audiences, and I'm sure you use the same phrase, they go, yeah, okay, that makes sense, which is you have to slow down to speed up. You have to take those intentional, not even pauses, but touch points with your people. Like, go ahead and spend that money with the branding agency if you feel that you need to, but involve key people and representatives and spokespersons from throughout your organization earlier on in the process, because the later you wait to engage them, I promise you, the more expensive it becomes.
Yeah. Well, and you end up spending more time after the fact, right? Trying to push it out and reinforce or whatnot because of the frustration and the lack of alignment and the pushback you get than if you take the time up front. So love that. Well, and so this is a great segue then to talk about the 4 Ps of culture. So tell us about them and let's jam.
So the 4 Ps of culture. So the short answer first is people, process, performance, right? And I talk about those if you picture the Venn diagram. And so when I talk to different leaders coming from different areas of an organization, they will come to the same business outcome from different lenses. The HR executive is going to come with a lens of people first, right? Who do we have? Do we have the right people in place to grow our business? The CFO, if you will, or the COO, they're going to come from more of a performance lens first. And they're going to say, bottom line, we need to hit these targets, meet these metrics and expectations, et cetera, right? And then, of course, you have to have processes that generate some consistency, that engineer out inefficiencies, et cetera. But the problem is if you've got the HR team looking through a people lens as they build out process, and you have the operations and the finance folks building out process through their lens of performance, they're not actually going to come together unless it's purely by coincidence. They're more likely going to diverge because what they find to be the first point of emphasis in the funnel is very different. And so I challenge people through this sort of 4P model to then look at the sweet spot instead before you start at the who or the what or the how, right? And that 4th P is the sweet spot where those 3 other P's converge, which is purpose. It is one of the reasons that the book is Growth on Purpose, right? Purpose is truly foundational. To come back to your very first question, Is it enough to be high performance or high purpose? And no, the answer is you have to be both, but you have to understand what type of performance feeds your purpose and how much your purpose feeds the right performance, attracts the right people, helps you to build the right processes, and then ultimately to fulfill the right performance.
I love that. And it's actually interesting because it's super timely because we're at a juncture in our business of growth, right? You kind of hit these plateaus and then you grow again and hit these plateaus. And one of the things, we've been really, really deliberate for the last several years, which I'm proud of our purpose and values and going, does this serve us? And what do we say no to? And what do we say yes to? And all of those types of things. And what we started to realize is we may have said yes to too many things, and these things are all lovely. Like there's nothing wrong with any of them, but we're starting to look at, but what's the highest value? And when we think about where we're at and whatever, we're starting to look at the processes and the performance metrics to say, what impact are these various things happening and what things are we going to sunset? And we've already determined there's a couple things that were part of the legacy of our offerings that we're sunsetting because we're like, you know what? It had its time. And when we start to actually look at the amount of effort that goes into it and whatnot, it is definitely a both end. And I think you can get so caught up in, oh, but it serves our purpose, to your point, and it's like, yeah, but you also don't want to burn people out, and you also don't want to fall out of love with your work.
Well, and it is easier to sunset processes than it is to sunset your purpose. If you ever get to the point where you say we've outgrown our purpose, the only time that that's a good problem to have is because you have fulfilled it at such a high level that now you want to kick it up a notch. But that's a really rare occurrence, right? And so I think it is incumbent upon any organization in any size to periodically, but with some regularity, check in on their purpose. First of all, is it something we still deeply believe, right? And assuming the word is yes, and let's hope it is, then are all the other things that we are doing, are we attracting the right talent in service of that? Are we building out the right processes that will facilitate our journey toward fulfilling that purpose? And are we measuring and tracking the right definitions of performance and success that will make that journey smoother?
Love it. Love it. So then that gets us into, you said you wrote growth on purpose for the model you use with clients. So we need to make sure we talk about this. So let's talk about your growth on purpose model. Can you walk us through it?
Absolutely. So this stems from, as you know, I realize I'm going to be preaching to the choir here, but typically when a client comes to me or a prospective client comes to me, it's not because they say, we want you to grow on purpose, right? That's ultimately the place I want to get them to, of course, but they have one or more of what I have seen to be 4 very common symptoms or pain points. And those 4 are low attraction. So they have difficulty attracting the right talent, to their team and into their business. And of course, we know the longer it takes to hire the right talent, the more expensive it is because now you've got to go to external recruiters and the time to fill and the loss of productivity of the people that are, picking up the slack. So there's that. The second one is low retention, right? Once we've found the right talent, they're not staying as long. Now, some of it is because of what we just talked about, right? The generations that are entering the workforce are not doing the cradle to grave situation where they spend their entire career with one organization. But a lot of leaders and organizations are not doing those folks any favors, and they're making it easier for them to look for the exit and then take that exit, right? So low retention is the second one. The third one is low engagement. We can devote, an entire episode just to that and to the pain point of that. But we know, between the cost of losing, the cost of high turnover, very expensive. The cost of low engagement, hugely expensive. And so that's a pain point. And then the third one is what I call low mobility or low internal fill rate. So this is really expressed in where organizations have key succession gaps that they are not able to fill with internal talent. And when you hear those out loud, you go, well, a lot of those are kind of easy fixes if they just do things a little bit more coordinated and a little bit more structured and a little bit more intentionally. But as we said before, the leaders at the very top of the organization are way too busy telling you how busy they are to take a step back and say, well, we could do this in a more cohesive way, right? And so the methodology is built on, so I had 4 P's of culture, but the methodology is around the 4 A's of growth on purpose. And so they are aspiration, awareness, acceleration, alignment. Aspiration is all about giving the right talent a reason to believe, right? So how do we attract the right talent into our organization with a magnetic purpose, a magnetic mission, something so clearly articulated and with such genuine conviction from the leaders at the top, as well as the individual contributors throughout the organization, that the right talent just lines up at your door, eager to work with you, right? So we want to get that pillar in place first. The second one is, once we've got them, how do we keep them longer, and how do we do that in such a way that they are feeling fulfilled? And so how do we increase that retention? And so that's through the awareness pillar. We have to, and I say we kind of organizationally, but just the collective we around, us as culture stewards. How do we help individuals and teams and organizations become exceptionally clear on what their natural strengths are, what their fast lanes are, again, as individual contributors, as well as an organization? What are your competitive advantages? And how big is the gap between what you want to be known for, what you want to be good at, and what you actually have right now, right? There has to be a degree of radical honesty and candor and transparency about current state. Otherwise, you're just eluding yourself and thinking that you're in better shape than you are. So that's the second one. The third one is acceleration. So how do we get people to more deeply engage during the time that they spend in an organization? And the way that we do that is by accelerating trust. And I say this very clearly in the book. We can't manufacture trust, although some leaders try, right? Some leaders are going to read that book and go, surely there's an easy button where we can just sort of simulate trust and get people to just like fall in line.
Go to a trust fall. Oh, that works.
Yeah, you're right. And, that again goes to sort of the command and control form of leadership and culture, which no longer works at least in the American organizations. And I have yet to see a global organization where that is really fitting anymore. But there are natural, authentic ways to accelerate trust within teams, across teams, and between teams and the leaders that they are trying to follow. So there are ways to do that will deepen engagement and, again, will increase productivity for the time that employees choose to spend within your organization, right? And then the fourth pillar is alignment. So if you've attracted the right talent through a magnetic mission, you have increased their awareness of their own strengths, their own maybe development areas and opportunities for improvement, their own competitive advantages and disadvantages. Then you bring them together and strengthen teams by accelerating trust. Now you want to align what they do with what matters collectively, right? And this is everything from making deeper connections between individual roles in the shared mission. It is also about what we just talked about, right? Engaging people earlier in a change process, in a strategic planning process, in a road mapping exercise, so that they feel like, as you just said before, and I use that quote all the time, people support what they help to create. So if you invite them in on the process of creating the roadmap to get you toward the future, you don't necessarily have to invite them to envision what that future horizon is, but invite them on building the roadmap and the journey to get there. The mere act of including them in that conversation will amplify their engagement, will deepen their commitment, and will strengthen their connection between what it is that they offer and how it's making a positive, visible, tangible impact on the overall growth strategy. If you do all of those things and you intentionally put those pillars in place in that sequence, right? You attract that talent and you nurture them through these 4 pillars. You're going to end up having an organization where your employees grow your business for you. And that is how you get to growth on purpose. That's how you get perpetual growth. That's how you unlock limitless talent. That's how you have teams that will go the extra mile to support each other's success in good times and in bad. And that's how you get people to co-create the strategy that will actually grow your business in a sustainable way.
Oh my God, so much goodness in that. We could have like 4 other conversations. I love it. Well, and I love it's, if going back to people support what they've helped to create, growing an organization is not just about sales and numbers. It's about growing your people. It's about growing your impact. And we always go back to, culture is not HR or the CEO's or leadership or the board's responsibility. It's everybody's responsibility. And so if everybody is, has some touch point where they feel connected, I love it. Like bam, bam, 100% mic drop, like, yes. So everyone needs to get your book, and we're going to put all that in the show notes. But now we got to switch over. And I don't know if anything has changed since the last time we talked, but we're just going to go there anyway. So as you know, going back to the messiness of being human and that everyone's walking around with some like, oh my gosh, whatever it might be that keeps them, from owning their walk. Claire, at this stage of your life, what is a self-limiting story that you still tell yourself sometimes? And when it shows up, how are you moving beyond it so that you can still show up as a leader in your life and have the impact you want to have?
Love that question. I am still human since the last time we spoke.
Oh, good.
Yeah, right. Woo. So, I haven't figured out how to have AI show up on my behalf and do these interviews, nor would I want to because I enjoy talking to you every time we do. But I still fall victim to imposter syndrome. And I'm comforted by the fact that every leader that I work with and every leader I get the honor to serve and to support also has that. And so when I hear that voice trying to get louder in my ear, saying, is this the day they're going to find out that you don't really know what you're talking about, or that, your methodology is crap, or whatever, I remind myself that this is a journey. Like truly, this life, this business, this career, it is a journey of exploration. It is a journey of self-awareness and self-fulfillment. And it is a journey of deepening relationships. And when I remind myself that my business is built on connection and built on relationships, that's when I shine. And that's when that little voice goes back whimpering in the corner where it belongs.
Oh, I love that so much. Plus, remember, everyone else has it. So, right? Like, here we go.
It's one of the things that connects us. So when we remember that, we're already a leg up.
100%. All right. Are you ready for quick questions?
Yeah.
Okay. Fill in the blank. Living authentically is?
Never toning down your walk for anyone.
Yes. Never. When the world is presenting an opening, but you don't feel like showing up as a leader, what do you do?
I take a step back and try to understand. I have a lot of conversations with myself. I'm a solopreneur, so I talk to myself all the time. But I'll check in with myself and say, why am I feeling like what's holding me back? What is making me resistant to showing up as a leader? Is it that imposter syndrome rearing its ugly head? Is it the universe telling me that this opening is actually not in alignment with what I want to do next? Or is it something else?
All right. What is something people would be surprised to know about you?
As we were wrapping up this interview, my office mate is running around and being a little bit mischievous. So I have a chinchilla, and during the day, he roams free just in my office, not in my entire home. And so now he wants my attention. So I'm trying not to get distracted by him. So if I'm looking down, it's because he's like chewing on my toe.
Well, and he has a YouTube channel. So
and he has a YouTube channel that has more followers than me. And I'm not bitter about it. It's just
I love it. All right. What's your favorite go-to movie?
I have several. It really depends on the mood that I'm in. My all-time favorite movie, it's probably the same one I said last time, is Shawshank Redemption. I don't know why. It's not because of all like the horrible prison scenes, but it is the redemptive ending. So yeah, it's probably that one still.
All right. What's your go-to song?
September, Earth, Wind, and Fire. It's the reason I got married on September 21st.
Love it. I was figuring by the book it was going to be something in your 80s playlist, but that's okay. That's close. Anyway.
It's close.
It's close. All right. What is something you can't live without?
As hokey as it sounds, love.
What is something in your ordinary daily life that makes your heart happy?
Now that the weather is finally getting warmer, I have this ritual where I wake up a little bit earlier, and I live a block off the beach. And so I will go for a walk for about a mile. There is a coffee shop at the end of that mile that I will reward myself with coffee and a nice warmed up chocolate croissant, which kind of negates the whole point of the walk, but whatever. I have my earpods in and I listen to a podcast or I listen to an audiobook. And it's just that when I get to start my day walking outside and reminding myself how inconsequential some of the daily anxieties are, when I look at the ocean and that beautiful view, it just kind of reminds me to put everything in perspective.
That sounds heavenly. Sounds absolutely heavenly. All right. What are you grateful for right now?
I am grateful for the fact that this great experiment of literally walking out of corporate, not having a plan all those years ago worked out. And I didn't have to go back to working full time for somebody else, but I get the honor of helping corporations from the outside.
That's awesome. That is something absolutely to be grateful for. All right. Claire, closing question. If you could challenge leaders everywhere to practice this one behavior that would create more human workplaces and equip everyone to show up as a leader, what would that be?
Stop suppressing your true personality. It takes one brave leader to go first, to be vulnerable, to remind everyone else in the C-suite that you're human, and the others will follow suit. When they see you stepping fully into your joy, they're going to want to have that feeling too.
Absolutely could not agree more. Well, Claire, this was so much fun. I will have you back anytime. And congrats on the book. And thank you for the fun conversation and being a bright spot in my day. And thank you for all the work you're doing and the sanity and the humanness that you're bringing back into the work you do and the communities you serve and the workplaces, because it's needed and much appreciated.
Thank you, my friend. I am so grateful to you for having me back on your stage, for having such a great conversation, and for reading the book and spreading the word. I really appreciate you.
I'm Rosie Ward, and this is Show Up as a Leader. To learn more, head over to peopleforwardnetwork.com and, of course, hit that follow button.